So we're doing the Frierdiker Rebbe. I don't know how many.
3 weeks, right?
At least, yeah.
Okay, good.
Because we'll do up till now, up till the 1927 arrest. We won't go there. And then there's the trip to Israel. There's the 1927.
29 pogroms, yeah.
And then there's the trip to America. There's a lot to talk on him.
And his connection to South Africa.
That's only in 48. We'll get there.
48 was Rabbi Eloi, by the way.
Yeah. That we'll get to. That
it was when the nationalist government came into power.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like Guy Fox said, it's all sorts of.
The
Are you also? Is it the Diwali tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, why don't you please close the door there? Give it 1 second, we'll start.
Okay, no problem.
And, wow. So how many people do you have? 25?
Whatever, about that.
Very challenging, people, because of COVID.
We do Shabbos at 10:30 straight into Mincha. So 10:30, Torah reading, Musaf, and Mincha.
Wow, how long is your drosha?
Now, it's Shabbos morning, I don't give a drosha. During the Torah reading, I tell them different words on the page.
Okay, let's start.
Okay.
Good work, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our Motzei Shabbos webinar. As I've said, week after week, hearing stories of tzaddikim on Motzei Shabbos, one merits amazing things. Very marbe. Tonight, Rabbi Karlebach is going to take us on the journey of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. He was born on the 12th of Tammuz, 1880 in Lubavitch in Russia. He was nostalgic. He passed away on Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat, in New York City, 1950. Just think about it. The Frierdiker Rebbe lived through the pogroms of Czarist Russia. He lived through communism. He lived through the First World War, the tragedies of the holocaust, of which he lost a daughter. He lived through the challenges of assimilated America. This giant of a man had a special connection to South Africa. So Rabbi Karlebach is going to take us, as he does week after week, on an amazing journey. Rabbi Karlebach, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Rabbi Mesinta, for that warm introduction. And as you say, we're about to discuss the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Chakadmur Yosef Yitzchak. He is also known as Rayatz. But we are doing this in a very special week. It is Shabbos Mevarchim Kislev. Rosh Chodesh Kislev is going to be on Tuesday. And the month of Kislev is filled with Chabad Hasidus special days. Firstly, you have Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which was the day that the Rebbe first went home after his Rachmana litzlan, his heart attack that he had on Shmini Atzeres in 1977. I was actually in New York at the time, and we don't appreciate necessarily how shattering that time was. But Baruch Hashem, the Rebbe recovered completely and furthered his activities immensely. So on Rosh Chodesh Kislev became our festival of our Rebbe, celebrating his recuperation and going home, as I say, for the first time. And by the way, that is because it's the Rebbe's Yom Tov. That is why all the kinnusim that take place, the kinnus hashluchim that takes place year after year, comes out on this Shabbos of Shabbos Mevarchim Kislev. On the second day of Kislev, base Kislev, is the day that the Svarim were returned to 770 after the theft, that whole story. And then you have Yud Kislev, the 10th of Kislev, and the 9th of Kislev, which is the Mittler Rebbe's birthday, and the 10th of Kislev is his liberation. You have the 14th of Kislev, which is the Rebbe's anniversary. Then you have the 19th of Kislev, which is considered the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus, because the Alter Rebbe was redeemed from jail. And then you have, of course, culminating in the festival of Hanukkah, the lights, and leading up to the revelation of Mashiach. So Kislev is a month replete with Hasidic holidays, so it's a special, appropriate Mitzvah Shabbos. Normally it's in New York now, there's thousands of Hasidim and all others who are there for the Kinnos. Because of COVID, everything is done on virtual. So now we start with a little of the biography. I hope we can do him justice, of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. His parents were married in 1910. No, they were married in, no, sorry, in, yeah, whatever. In 1885. And it took a while for his mother to fall pregnant. According to some, she actually had a miscarriage. And she tells the story that took a few years till she fell pregnant, and she was replete with doubt. And then after Kiddush, they made a special Misha Berach, and she had a dream. And she sees in her dream a very distinguished person who asked her why she is crying so much. And she said, I'm crying because I feel terrible. I was never blessed with children. And in her dream, the Jew says, don't cry. I promise you, you're going to have a child this year. But there are two conditions. Right after Yom Tov, you should give your personal 18 rubles to tzedakah from your money. And the second was that no one should know about it. And after a while, two more people appeared into the dream, and they agreed, and they blessed me. My husband, the Rashab, came back from Fabrengen. He was extremely pleased. He had a smile on his lips. I told him about the dream. He went right away to the Rebbe Marash and told him everything. When the Rebbe Marash called me, he asked me to describe the three men that were in the dream. And he told me, the first one is my father, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the other two was the Mittler Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe. And after Yom Tov is over, you should fulfill that aspect of the dream. But the question was, where am I going to get 18 rubles personal money? And I remembered that I had a dress that was sewn in the fashion of the time, and the Marash was not happy with it. So he didn't want me to wear it. So I sold that dress, and then I borrowed the money. And that year, the previous Rebbe was born. At his bris, he was crying very much. He was born on the 12th of Tammuz in 1880, Tofresh Mem. And the bris, he was crying a lot, as I say, and the Rebbe Marash said, "Why are you crying? One day you will be a Rebbe, and you will be saying Mamorim in very great, with a beautiful mouth, really saying it beautifully." The previous Rebbe writes that his father began educating him at a very young age. As I told you last week already at the Rebbe Rashab, I told some of the stories of how he educated his son and how he had thought everything out. The Rebbe Rashab often said, just like it is a positive commandment for every man to wear tefillin, it's so too it is a commandment for every father, for every parent, father and mother, to think every day how to bring a spirit of Yiddishkeit into their children. And he says, when I was a very small child and he began speaking, my father said, whatever you want to ask me. This is what he remembers. And when he taught me to say Maida Ani, he told me to bend my head a little bit, to put one hand against the other, and to say the Maida Ani. So when I grew a little older, I said to my father, why? Why do we say the Maida Ani in this way? And my father said, the truth is that we should do things without asking why. But I did tell you to ask me. So therefore, he said he called his Mesharis, Rabbi Yosef Mordechai, who was a man of 80 years old. And he said to him, in front of me, says the previous Rebbe, Yosef Mordechai, how do you say the Moida Ani? And he answered, I put my hands together and I bend my head and I say Moida Ani. So his father said, and why do you do that? And Rabbi Yosef Mordechai, the 80-year-old, said, Ich weiß nicht, I don't know. When I was a small child, that's the way they taught me to do it. So my father looked at me and he said, you see, he does it because that's what his father taught him to do it. And his father taught him all the way to Moshe Rabbeinu. And that goes all the way to Avram Avinu. So I said, look, I'm just a small child. And my father said that all Jews are small children. When we get older, that's when we know that we are all still small. And he writes that one morning, my mother, the Rebbetzin Sterne Sarah, gave me breakfast. And my father came into the room and he said, did Yosef Yitzchak say Moida Ani? To meet with communal leaders into Holland to bring pressure from banking interests to quell the prevalent disposition towards the pogroms that were there. And the Rebbe could have left Russia many times, but he never did because he was so involved. One of the interesting things that is written is that the Rebbe Rashab was very ill at times. And he turned around to his wife and he said, you know, I'm so ill, I can't accomplish much here anymore. I think I'm going to go to Israel. And his Rebbetzin said, but what will you do with the Hasidim? He said, don't worry. Our son is very capable. He will look after them. And he was only 17 at the time. As I mentioned, with the Gemillas Chasodim, the previous Rebbe was arrested when he was 11 years old for the first time. In total, the previous Rebbe would be arrested a total of 7 times. One when he was only 11, and the second time would be in 1902 in Lubavitch, and the third time in 1906 and 1910 and 1916 for trying to get exemptions for the different people from the army. And in 1920, he was also arrested. But he says none of these compared to the arrest that was in 1927, as we will get to. And he tells that once the enlightened Jews, those Jews who were against Yiddishkeit, still in the Czarist days, they wanted to bring in laws within the Tsarist government to prevent from Yidden from living as Torah. One of these maskilim, the previous Rebbe writes, was a man by the name of Krebs. And he was so to say, a rabbi put up by the Tsarist government. And he collected a lot of material, brought it to Petersburg to get decrees against from Jews. And when my father heard about it, he said, go to Petersburg and nullify the whole thing, but do it with quietly. So because it had to be quiet, I took my wife, Rabbi Hamadina, and we said we are going away to Odessa for health reasons. And I got also to Petersburg where this Krebs was, and I tried all my ways to nullify it, and there was nothing I can do. I went back to my father and I told him that everything I tried to do came to naught. When I came into my father's room, it was in the morning, and he was getting ready to daven. His tallis was on his shoulder. When I told him everything I had tried to do and I couldn't get it done, my father said, you know, once the Alter Rebbe sent his son, the Mittler Rebbe, for a certain mission, and he wasn't able to do it. He came back to his father and he said he couldn't do it. And his father too, when he came to him, was holding his tallis. And he said to him, you see this tallis? It's an aspect of makif. And makif is able to blind the eyes of the external ones. He says that the Mittler Rebbe took the tzitzis of his father, gave it a kiss, and he went back and did what he had to do. So the previous Rebbe says, when I heard that from my father, I said, okay. I took his tzitzis, I kissed them, and I went back to Petersburg to try and nullify all that I could. And then I had an idea. I went to the hotel where Krebs was staying, and I asked for an appointment, and he gave me it. And he was bragging about how he had collected all these paperworks that he's going to bring to the government. And with these, he is going to be able to get rid of all frumkeit because of it. And he showed me a whole folder that he had with all the paperwork he had gathered. I said, tell me something. Maybe you can show me the folder. I'd like to see. You did so much work and so much effort. Would you mind showing it to me, what you managed together? He said, why not? I'll show it to you with pleasure. I'm not afraid, because in a few days I'm going to present this all to the government, and you'll see that they'll come out with this. And he gave me these papers. He says, as soon as the previous Rebbe says, as soon as the papers were in his hand, he began tearing them up completely. When Krebs saw that, he began to yell, "What did you do? I spent months gathering all these papers, and now I can't get them again." And he began yelling at me. He smashed me up. I took off from the hotel. I ran to my father to tell him that, Baruch Hashem, it was all over. And after a while, he says this Krebs got a throat infection and he passed away. The previous Rebbe, the Rebbe, tells another story of how the previous Rebbe had courage. And this was already in the communist time, when the there was a certain minister that was against the Jewish people, and he wanted to bring all these decrees against them. And the previous Rebbe tried very, very much to stop those decrees, and he wasn't able to. But then he thought of an amazing idea. He learned from a person who was helping him. He learned where the minister's office was. And he says, as long as you can do things with confidence, you could get away with a lot. A guy told him the whole schedule of that minister who was supposed to stamp anti-Jewish decrees. And the previous Rebbe went to that building. He waited for lunchtime when he saw that minister walk out of the building. He says, if you walk in confidence, nobody questions you. Even though there were gendarmes, there were all this police in front of the building, confidently, as a result of the education, as we mentioned, of Mesiras Nefesh that his father had given him, he confidently walked into the building. He had been described where the minister's office was. He walked into the minister's office, and he was told there were different files for decrees that the minister had to look at, and files for decrees that were already looked at. And he went into the file for decrees that had to be looked at. He found that file, which had an anti-Jewish decree. He went into the desk and took a stamp which said rejected, and that he transferred into the file of papers already looked at that would be taken off by the secretaries to do what they wanted. And in that way, he accomplished that decree, that harsh decree against the Jews was nullified. One begins to see the unbelievable Mesiras Nefesh that his father had put into him. And now, as we come to the end of this program, I want to tell you the story of the first arrest that the previous Rebbe went into. And as I discussed, he had learned Mishnayos by heart, and he earned a lot of money for it, and he established a free loan fund. He used to give interest-free loans in the sums of 3 to 5 rubles to market people, to peddlers who made their rounds with bundles of flax, pelts, chickens, eggs, onions, and the like. And he kept accounts of it, And amongst the regulars who frequently made use of his fund was Reb David the Butcher. He was nicknamed Buck Teeth David. Reb David was a man of 50 heading a family of 8 souls, a frightful pauper who earned a living from the toil of his hands. No work was too difficult for him. Didn't matter heat of summer or winter, as long as he could earn a few kopkas, he would work at it. And he never complained. He was a very simple man. And even though he studied at Cheder, he forgot his learning. And besides the prayers and the Tillim, he didn't know much, but he was an honest, simple person. And he was the first of the 10 men to make up the Tillim Society and to get up early in the morning. And the previous Rebbe says, I loved to watch those moments when Reb David would head home from the mikveh. His face was aflame, and his 4 sons would be running after him, and he would walk with them to the shul. At one time, he was 11 years old. His parents had gone away, and he was staying with his grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivka. The Lubavitch police force had what he called a prestov and oradnik, and 3 simple police to keep the peace. On 2:00 in the afternoon, in the month of Av, which was 1891, was a market day. The previous Rebbe says, I was walking home from Cheder for lunch, together with my friend Shimon, who was the son of Reb Shmuel, the one who wrote the Mamorim of the Rebbe Marash. The market square was jam-packed. We met Reb David the Butcher carrying a calf on his shoulders, a small lamb in his arms, and when he saw me, he said, I hope to God that I'll earn well today. And before he finished speaking, the policeman, the Radnik, came before him and struck a blow across his face. And he began bleeding from his nose. The previous Rebbe, 11 years old, saw that a Jew had been hit. He jumped to the policeman and he said, you drunk, you despicable one. And he shoved him hard. The policeman cast upon him the libel that he had ripped off the brass badge and interfered with carrying out his duties. And he told one of the lower policemen to take him to the police station. The previous Rebbe writes that before I had a chance to utter a sound, a drunken peasant grabbed me with a powerful hand by my clothing and my neck. And they schlepped me through the market, but because there was so much noise, nobody paid attention to us. When we got to the courtyard, the guard opened the gate, and my escort handed me over to the officer on duty, and he said that I have been arrested with all the crimes that they mentioned. The officer on duty took me with contempt. He gave me a slap. He grabbed me by my ear. He opened up a door of a dark room and he locked it behind me. He says, I was very afraid and also hungry. But after a moment, I thought to myself, just like my holy ancestors, I am sitting in prison. And my father had taught me that wherever you are, you shouldn't just waste your time. you must occupy myself with words of Torah. And as I was already fluent in Zroim and Moyed, he began to review the Mishnayos by heart. Suddenly, he heard some very strange sounds. I strained to focus my thought on the learning of Mishnayos, and I moved away from the corner that I heard those sounds from. The Previous Rebbe writes, to this day, I can remember the thoughts which ran through my mind at that time concerning Mincha. I was sitting in the dark. I didn't know the hour. I knew it was the afternoon. So I began davening Mincha. I said the Ketores and Ashrei, and upon reaching the Amidah, I wasn't sure which version of the prayers should I say. Should I say the Anenu, since I was in a state of distress? Should I say Al Chet, most of which I knew by heart? But before I can finish the thought, I said no. Not only am I not going to say Anenu Al Chet, I'm not even going to say Tachnun, because today is a very special good day. It is the day in which God granted me the privilege to be imprisoned for defending the honor of a fellow Jew. And it should be a festival for me. And with feeling of joy, I daven Shema Esrei with proper concentration to the best of my ability. After Mincha, I again heard the sound of grunting and the lengthy struggle. I was very frightened. But then I remembered that my friend Shimon had shown me a box of matches he had bought, and in the great confusion, the matches were with me. I lit a match and saw that which was making all the noise was a tied-up calf with a muzzle in his mouth, lying in the corner. I stopped being afraid. I finished reviewing, he says, the whole Zroim and went to Moyed. Before I could finish Moyed, I heard sounds of footsteps. I saw the officer on duty opening up the door. And the officer says, please forgive me. I didn't know you are the nephew of the Razah. That was the Rebbe's brother, Reb Zalman Aaron, who had heard about the whole thing and came to free his nephew. And now you're commanded to be released. He said to him, please have mercy upon me. Don't tell them that I hit you or pulled you by the ear. I didn't do it out of malice, only out of habit. And you weren't bleeding anyway. And none of your teeth fell out. So what's so terrible? When we entered the room, Reb David, the butcher, was bruised and beaten. He was standing there with the policeman who had hit him. And the policeman said that the calf which Reb David had been carrying was the calf which Reb Meir, the butcher, had bought from his brother and was stolen by Reb David. And that's why I beat him up. And this child, pointing at me, insulted me and ripped off my badge. The witnesses tried to say that he had purchased the calf. And I knew that I had loaned him the money. And when they were still in the prison, I had told them that I had seen the calf in the jail cell. So they rushed to find Meir the butcher, whom they had accused Reb David of stealing the calf from, and head of the jail was presiding over the case with this police officer against Reb David. He said to the Prestov, I was told that a bound and muzzled calf is lying in the jail of the police station. He was in a bad mood, the head of that jail, because he was forced to leave his card game. He stood up in a rage. He went to investigate them, and how amazed they were to see that there was indeed the calf which Meir had brought from the brother of policemen who had beaten David. And it was discovered upon investigation that that policeman had conspired to sell the calf to Meir and then to steal it from him. For a week, the policeman sat in jail and was brought to trial. He was dismissed. When the Rebbe Rashab returned from his trip, the Razah, his older brother, told him the whole story and praised the previous Rebbe to him. He said, thanks to your son, David's innocence and the policeman's guilt had been established and the calf had been returned to him. And the Rebbe said to him, you did well to protect the dignity of an honest Jew. And if for that you suffered for a few hours, so what? And his father said, now it is demonstrated how important and beautiful it is to have Mishnayos by heart. Because without that, in what way are you any different or better, lahavdol, than the calf that was also in jail? You were both in jail because you knew Mishnayos and you reviewed them there. The words of imprisonment passed with words of Torah, in which the advantage of man over beast adds. And my father's words were engraved in my heart. Love and esteem every honest Jew, be you rich or poor in Torah. Protect the dignity of every Jew, even if danger is involved, and always prepare provisions for the way by learning by heart, so that no time will be wasted without the study of Torah. And he says his father then gave him 10 rubles. That is the story of the first arrest of the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe. And the point of all these things is how the previous Rebbe really inculcated the aspect of sacrifice, as I said, even at a price to yourself when it costs you. We will take up from after that, after the Rebbe, previous Rebbe became Rebbe in 1920, and all the events that went through him. I'd like to conclude one of the big activities that the previous Rebbe taught was li'alter l'tshuva, li'alter l'geula, that we have to do what we have to do in order to bring the redemption. Let us hope as we go to the month of Kislev, a month truly of redemption in every possible way, that we are privileged to see the final redemption with Mashiach. A good vach. We look forward to continuing next week.
Rabbi Karlbach, thank you so much once again. It is absolutely enlightening and inspiring to hear you. You are so informative and it just flows. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock is David Solomon, who is an expert on history, and he's doing a 6-part series on the history of from the creation of the world. We had the first one yesterday. We had the first one last week. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock Johannesburg time. He is addressing us. Everybody, please join in. A good vach, and please God, Mashiach immediately.